Dana White gives him the money, gives him all the demands, and then for him to say yes and then say no. I think that is a completely blatant remark that is definitely because of ducking.
The start of a new era. Welcome back to the MMA Outsiders. This is episode 119. Finally, long overdue. We are back on the airwaves for the first time since March, and a lot has changed in the scope of martial arts. My name is Zain and Bando. I'm back in the main host chair, but now alongside a new co-host and a familiar name to the ETV Network family, Anthony Balester. Anthony, how are you? We are in the middle of a very, very hectic fight week leading up to UFC 317 in Las Vegas.
I'm definitely glad to be a part of the show. It's definitely a huge honor. I've always been a huge fan of the MMA Outsiders, and I remember when I first joined the network, I was a special guest, and I love the show. I've been watching it ever since, and now that I get to be a permanent co-host, I'm definitely excited. I love UFC. It's been a while since I got to do a weekly UFC show, so I'm definitely glad to get back into it, and I guess we picked a perfect week to start.
Yeah, I guess we picked a perfect week to start as well. Before we get into more of the particulars as to what this new era is going to look like, wanted to run through a few quick reminders. Be sure to like and subscribe to the ETB Network as the climb to 1,000 subscribers continues. You can do so at youtube.com/ETB Network, and you can also listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. And for those of you who are listening on the audio-only side, please be sure to move back over to the video only side as well. We'd very, very appreciate love on both fronts. And of course, just stay tuned for a small message in the middle of the show about our friends over at Playback, as the MMA Outsiders in every single show on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network is presented by Playback. So stay tuned for more as to how they integrate into the fold and make part of the network what it is. And of course, for those of you who don't remember me, my name is Zain Bando. I'm a staff writer over at MMA Knockout on Sports Illustrated. We've been pumping out a lot of content over there, covering every single UFC event every single week. Also touching on some fellow regional promotions. We also cover the PFL a little bit. We were covering boxing for a while, hoping to get back into that now that Dana White is in the TKO boxing fold, and so much more. Anthony, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I'm Anthony Balester. Obviously, I'm a part of ETB Sports. I've been a podcaster for ETB Sports for almost a year now. Obviously, you guys have seen me do the ETB Sports show with Nick Morganson. Obviously, I've been making appearances on the Football Forecast show. I make appearances on Forever Power 5. So you kind of see me do a mixture of everything. I definitely like to be in the podcast world. That's where I specialize in. And I definitely can't wait to also be a part of this show as well.
I guess we have a loaded show to start, so let's not waste any more time. The biggest topic off the top, and a topic that I think a lot of people were not expecting, at least given the setting that it was in. Jon Jones officially retired from the UFC. What were your initial reactions to this? Where were you when this happened, and were you surprised as to how everything went down, considering that from the looks of it, the Tom Aspinall fight is all but dead, if not dead completely, which is pretty crazy to think about, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And the timing of this couldn't have been more shocker than what it was. Actually, I just got done watching the UFC fight card in Baku, which was a tremendous card. And then I'm just scrolling through YouTube, and I see a video of Dana White saying Jon Jones is retired. At first, I thought it was AI generated. I'm like, there's no way this is how we find out. So I just kept searching social media, and I'm like, oh my God, this is how we're going to find out that now Jon Jones is retired just by a phone call during a Dana White press conference. And I was definitely disappointed. And I was upset. This was probably the fight to make in all of UFC. So the fact that we don't get to see this and how this all unfolded was definitely upsetting. What were your thoughts, Zain? I know you had to be more shocked than me.
Yeah, so I was sitting at dinner at an Italian restaurant, and in fact, the first I heard about it was I was getting texts. I was getting texts from people I hadn't heard of in a long time, literally asking me if what they were sending me was real. I didn't find out through a traditional way of, watching Dana White's press conference or anything. I was literally getting text messages from people I hadn't heard of in a very long time is they know I'm like the main MMA guy that they know in their inner circle, right? Literally asking me if what they were sending me was real, and I was like, oh my god, he actually retired because I'm just gonna say this for people who know more than me, and people who are in the know more than I am that I speak to and who I'm close with. This was all a huge shock to them too. They thought that they were going to get this fight done. They thought it was going to be in November at Madison Square Garden. They thought it was going to headline that card, which is a card that usually is a stacked card and usually has a couple of title fights attached to it, and that was going to be the one. So I was extremely shocked to hear that. And I think Ariel Helwani said it best. I think announcing Jon Jones' retirement at a random post-fight press conference in Baku, Azerbaijan, of all places, was to me really, really, or was to him really, really bizarre. And to an extent, I agree with him. But at the same time, given, and I'm sure you agree with this to a certain extent, given how strange the UFC has been, and lately with Dana White's absences at post-fight press conferences, with some of these major fights not taking place when they're supposed to, and everything else, I think it was almost a fitting note to, in my opinion, what has been a very frustrating year for the promotion overall. Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And what was probably maybe one of the best years in UFC history in 2024, this year up to this point, it's kind of been a little lackluster. And a lot of people are saying, oh, maybe this is because Dana White's not fully invested as he once did. He's got so many other things that he's working on. He's doing power slap. You got the Brazilian jiu-jitsu now that they're doing now. You got, obviously, he's promoting the Terrence Crawford Canelo Alvarez fight. So a lot of people are saying, Dana White's got his hands in so many different avenues that, he's not spending his full focus on the UFC like he once did. So I definitely agree, Zan, with everything you said. It doesn't seem like it is a surprise factor in what we've gotten so far from the UFC this year. And, when it comes to the Jon Jones thing, I think two things can be true. Okay. I think Jon Jones can undoubtedly be the GOAT. He went on a tremendous win streak, one of the longest, if not the longest, we've seen in the UFC. He's beaten more champions than anybody. He's defended his titles more than everybody. So, yes, on one end, he can be the GOAT. But on the other end, I think he did duck Tom Aspinall, and I really think he's just a shitty person.
Interesting. Can you go deeper as to why Jon Jones ducked Tom Aspinall? Because I think a lot of people have a similar opinion, and then I'll go with what I think about that.
Yeah, and I think it stems from just the way he handled the entire process. I mean, if it was ultimately just down to he didn't want to do it anymore, he didn't want to train anymore, he didn't want to put the work in, then why didn't he just retire last November after he beat Stipe? Why would he string this along like this? And then he makes all these demands for all this money, and then Dana White gives him the money, gives him all the demands, and then for him to say yes and then say no. I think that is a completely blatant remark that it's definitely because of ducking. It's not the fact that he didn't want to fight no more, because I think we all know that if he was fighting like an Alex Pereira or a guy stylistically that he could match up with better, he probably would.
Blades is another example of that too.
And I think that this is just a bad remark for the UFC, because this is now another heavyweight super fight that we don't get. We didn't get Fedor and Lesnar. We didn't get Francis and Jon Jones. And now we're not going to get Aspinall and Jon Jones. And I think that this has been a disservice to Tom Aspinall. This is not like the McGregor and Chandler situation. Chandler, wasn't trying to fight for a belt. Aspinall was. He had no choice as the interim champion who already defended it once before. He really had to wait for Jon Jones. And the fact that Jon Jones strung us all along, playing these mind games on social media, just for ultimately for him to say no after the UFC caved and gave everything he wanted, I think that's why it looks like he's a duck. And I think we need an apology from Dana White as well. I know Dana White tried his best to make this fight happen, and ultimately he probably wanted the fight to happen more so than we did because of all the money he would have made on this. But the fact that he's the one that's on Instagram Live telling the fans, quit your bitching, the fight's going to be announced soon, and then saying I guarantee it, just for it all to not happen anyways, goes to show you that us fans were right from the beginning. And for you to diminish what we were saying when we were right all along, I think we deserve an apology from Jon Jones and Dana White.
It's fire. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up to that question concerning what you just said. So it was about 15 days ago, let's call it, Dana's at point blank that Jon Jones agreed to fight Tom Aspinall. Do you think he knew then that there was a hints that the fight wasn't going to happen, or did you think that they were on the 1 yard line and they were close? What did you think?
No, I definitely think that he knew prior. I find it hard to believe that he just found out on a phone call the night before the Baku card that this wasn't going to happen. I think that's completely BS. I think it's just like Earl Hawani said, that Jon Jones got his demands, agreed to the fight, and then decided, you know what, I don't want to fight. And I think that's just because he probably thought, hey, if I make such outrageous demands, maybe the UFC won't give in, and that could be his out to not fight Tom Aspinall. Then the script got flipped when Dana White actually gave him everything he wanted, and at that point he had no choice but to say, oh, I just want to retire and not fight. No, it's not that. It's just he doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall. And Jon Jones said it himself a couple months ago. He doesn't know how fighters can handle a loss. Because his career besides the DQ has been completely unblemished, he said straight out, if he ever lost, he wouldn't know what kind of depression that would bring up on him. And seeing a guy like Tom Aspinall, who might be the first person that could actually give Jon Jones a legitimate loss, I don't think he wanted to go out with a loss. I think he wants to just retire and just leave it up to speculation, just be like, hey, I never lost, and keep it that way.
So pretty much in so many words, you're saying that you don't think he legitimately retired, is what you're saying.
I think it's like what Tom Aspinall said. Tom Aspinall retired Jon Jones without even having to fight him. I think if Alex Pereira would have went out and maybe beat Ankalaev, I wouldn't be surprised if Jon Jones would have got the UFC to do that super fight, or if he was fighting someone else better stylistically. But knowing how good Tom Aspinall is, knowing how explosive he is, and how Tom Aspinall could do a little bit of everything, he's the complete nightmare matchup for Jon Jones. And I think Jon Jones, at this point of his career, did not want to risk leaving UFC with an unblemished career.
Interesting. So I'm going to give my take because it's multiple factors. I do think, in a sense, this puts a stain on his legacy, but as you kind of alluded to it, 16 successful title defenses, beat numerous Hall of Famers, was the youngest champion in UFC history. I think most of his legacy will never be able to be rewritten. I think the big question is going to be now is, when people look back on the Francis Ngannou thing, was it really Jones or was it really Francis that caused that whole thing to blow up? I don't think people really know that. And I think in this Aspinall situation, the biggest loser in this, to be honest with you, even though they were the ones that tried to make it, is the UFC, because, as I alluded to just a few minutes ago, they've had such a year where, some of these major fights just haven't happened. The Ilia Islam fight being one of them. This would have been another one, to fit that bill, et cetera, et cetera. And, I feel like, the UFC just letting them walk away like that is a little bit cowardly, just considering that allegedly they tried so hard to make the fight a reality. And, Dana even admitted it a few weeks ago that they can't make him fight. But at the same time, I don't understand this. Where was the same energy when George St. Pierre walked away after beating Johnny Hendricks, even though a million people who saw that fight, myself included, knew that he lost, and Dana was the one who said, oh yeah, you owe it to the belt to make sure that you give him the proper rematch, and the rematch never happened. I just don't understand why that same energy doesn't apply 12 years later. And what I also don't understand is if it really was the biggest fight in UFC history, the biggest fight in heavyweight history, when you knew that Stipe Miocic was on the verge of retiring, I feel like, at that point, and I'm sure you agree to an extent, that the Miocic fight really didn't make a whole lot of sense when it happened, when Aspinall was literally healthy, active, and ready to go. It could have made that fight. We would have been done with this whole saga, and then John would have retired fighting Stipe Miocic this year instead of last year, and instead we got the reverse of it, and we didn't even get the Jones Aspinall fight after all. So I think ultimately this makes the heavyweight division look weak. What they're going to ultimately do, and this is just a prediction that I have, is they're going to make him fight Cyril Gane, and it's more than likely going to be in Abu Dhabi or Madison Square Garden, and he's going to run through Cyril Gane, and the only guy that he's going to have left to fight is Thomas Almeida. And it's clear the UFC doesn't want to do any business with Francis Ngannou. So, and you want to talk about, the heavyweight division being the weakest it's ever been, or the weakest it's been in probably a decade. I don't even think that that's an understatement. And then some. I think that that's a real scar on a division that used to have so much intrigue and so much meaning to it that now I feel like is lost. And even though Aspinall may have retired Jon Jones without even fighting him, I think there are tons of Aspinall haters that are going to say that he's not the legitimate heavyweight champion until he defends the heavyweight title. And I'm sorry to say, and this may be a brutal take, but I'm still one of those people. He didn't beat the champion to become the champion. So until he defends his title, until he actually goes through with his promise that he is the best heavyweight in the sport, I'm really not buying most of it. And I know it's very, very harsh to say, but I actually have a feeling that this is all a play. He's hoping that Aspinall loses his next fight so he can come back and fight somebody easier and then retire on top. That's what I think. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the stuff you said. And when you mentioned the Stipe fight, I mean, nobody really wanted to see that happen. I mean, Stipe had been away from the game for so long. I mean, the guy doesn't even train full time for UFC. He spends a lot of his time being a fireman, which is very memorable, and that's why I have so much respect for Stipe. But Stipe was in no position to beat Jon Jones. And I think what this shows is just how shitty of a person Jon Jones is, because I feel like the reason why the whole Stipe fight happened was probably because Dana White was catering to Jon Jones. He probably thought, I'll give Jon Jones everything he asked for to hope that maybe he can get this super fight. And the fact that he gave him the Stipe fight after, we had to wait on it because of the injury for so long, and then for Jon Jones to, stroll us along so long to not fight anyways, it goes to show you that he doesn't care about respect. He doesn't care about what the fans want. He only cares about what's the best interest in Jon Jones. And that's why we see these things happening, outside the UFC. And now there's more legal stuff that's happening with Jon Jones. I'm not sure if that played into the retirement, but it just goes to show you as great of a fighter Jon Jones is, he's really been a shitty person and never really cared about anybody else other than himself. And I agree with you. It seems like it probably will be Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane. Because when you look at the landscape of the heavyweights, they're not going to have him fight Blades again for a third time. He already submitted Volkov, so they're not going to have him fight Volkov. And I think Almeida, as good as he is, he probably needs one more win. And I'm not sure if that's a fight that would really sell right now. So they're probably going to have to push Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane. And ultimately, if Ciryl Gane could pull off the upset, I think that's just a way of Jon Jones being able to say, hey, this Aspinall hype was just hype. He was never that good to begin with. I got Ciryl Gane out of there very quickly. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on Aspinall. If he does lose that fight, then that pretty much diminishes and makes Jon Jones look like he was right all along. Now, if he goes out there and makes easy work of Ciryl Gane, maybe defends his belt another couple times, the only glimmer of hope that we have is maybe Jon Jones could get that itch, and maybe Jon Jones could be like a Amanda Nunes, where maybe after taking a year or two off, Aspinall defends his belt a few times, and now Aspinall is in this conversation as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Maybe that could convince Jon Jones to come out and fight, but I think Jon Jones is set where his career's at. He's made enough money, and I think he's fine with just leaving the UFC with an unblemished record. And it sucks for us UFC fans, but again, like I said, Jon Jones is only thinking about the best interest of him and not so much us.
Yeah, that's what I'll say too. Do you think this is a plot? It's for him to maybe sign with the PFL and fight Francis Ngannou, or what do you think? What do you think?
I wish it was, and that would be a fight that I would love to see. I think stylistically, I think Francis Ngannou would be a much easier matchup. Obviously, Francis Ngannou has the most KO power we've ever seen, but I think with Jon Jones's grappling ability, I think he'd be able to get that fight to the ground. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Jon Jones-Ngannou fight would be similar to how the Ciryl Gane fight went. But ultimately, even if Jon Jones wanted to do that, he couldn't do that because since he's still under contract with the UFC, even if he retired, the UFC still owns his rights, similar to what's going on with Conor McGregor.
And I think that's a perfect segue to Conor McGregor because he was back in the news again. This time for all the wrong reasons. Of course, he punched someone in a nightclub in Ibiza, and this is just, I guess, another saga in the Conor McGregor downfall. Him not fighting and him, being a part of viral videos that have nothing to do with the UFC. I don't really have too many words to say other than this is just McGregor being McGregor. And probably in another 2 weeks, there's going to be another video that comes out. And then in another few weeks, there's going to be another video that comes out. I honestly think, as sad as it seems to say, this just seems like business as usual for the former double champion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I said I was super stunned about the first topic with Jon Jones. This is something that I wasn't stunned at all. I mean, we've seen Conor McGregor have this history. He's punched fans or other people before. And man, just for a guy who was so beloved and was one of the best fighters to ever fight, I mean, the first guy to ever win double champ status, to now just continue to see his descend. He just seems like, like a person that may be on drugs. I'm not going to speculate what he's on, but he just seems like a guy who has a bunch of money. He has no interest in fighting. Any thought of him ever coming back to UFC or any promotion has got to be gone. There's no way I see McGregor fighting. He's got way too much money.
No, he's probably done.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what kind of drugs he's on, but he seems like he's on steroids. He seems like he's doing other stuff, man. It just seems like he's more worried about that and just being, in the limelight than he actually is in fighting. I mean, and we just see two different guys. I mean, look at the rivalry between him and Khabib. And look at how Khabib's retirement is. Khabib's still in the gym with the boys. He's still trying to help these guys become future champions and defend their belts. And what is McGregor really doing other than going out to clubs and punching people in the face? So we get to see two opposite ends of the spectrum of two, great fighters in Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor, and how one guy is continuing his dominance by coaching and while the other guy is just continuing to destroy his image outside the UFC.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I really don't have much more to add other than a very interesting point. I think it was a week and a half, I don't know, week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, there was a street interview, and it was revealed by Adam Glynn to Dana White. It was asked by Adam Glynn to Dana White, what's the latest with McGregor? And would even hear Dana say that he hasn't talked to McGregor in a while. I think that tells you all you need to know, that there's no way that he's fighting at least anytime soon, not even with the new TV rights deal. And I'm sure that even if the UFC attempted to leverage McGregor, I'm almost positive, and I'm just going to make a prediction. I don't know this for certain, but I'm probably 90% sure that most of those networks that are in the running to potentially get the rights to the UFC probably eventually just said, we're probably not interested in McGregor anymore, just given all of his outside troubles. And the UFC probably had to accept it for where it was, and they probably had to move on. And if this isn't a potential final straw, then I don't know what is. So,
no, I absolutely agree with both said. I think I agree with you. I don't think McGregor has any chance of coming back, and I think Dana White has finally moved on as well.
And I think this is a good place to take a quick break, as we're gonna move over to a very small break and get right back to the show after we hear a message from our friends over at Playback, and we will be back shortly. Just want to do a quick timeout in the middle of the show to remind you guys that the MMA Outsiders is presented by Playback. And I teased that there was something a little bit earlier in the show, but now without further ado, here we go. Presented by Playback, watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. You won't regret it. All right, so coming out of the timeout, we're back. We're going to get into some UFC Baku recapping now. We're going to take a look at the main event. Khalil Rountree Jr. It's done across a 5-round decision over former UFC light heavyweight champion Jamahal Hill, utilizing his leg kicks and dangerous striking to get the job done. The Warhorse gets back into the win column after losing to Alex Pereira at UFC 307. And I think this is anything but an understatement. I think that this was Rountree's most impressive win of his UFC career to date, and that's now 3 consecutive losses for Jamahal Hill. Anthony, what did you think of this fight overall, and did you expect Rountree Jr. to beat Hill as easily as he did? Because I thought he would win, but I didn't think he'd win in that fashion, especially with just the amount of elusiveness and just real I guess variety of strikes, but primarily utilizing his leg kicks to get the job done. What did you think?
Yeah, I guess tonight we're going to be agreeing a lot, Zan, because I agree with everything you said. I thought Rountree would win, but I did not think it would be this decisive. I mean, I know Rountree, when we look at when Alex beat Yuri Prochazka, he beat Jamahal Hill, and he beat Rountree. I can make the argument that Rountree was the one who gave Alex Pereira the closest fight.
He
ultimately
was
he ended
winning
up
the fight until he
getting over
lost on the
Renato.
judges' scorecards too.
Yes, and ultimately I know he got beat up pretty badly, but I thought he gave Alex some problems, but man, he completely dominated Jamahal Hill, and what a fall from grace for Jamahal Hill. Man, this guy got completely killed by Alex Pereira. I didn't think he looked that good against Jerry Prohaska, and then he did not go good in this fight. And Rountree,
No.
like you said, he dominated early with those leg kicks. I think that kind of put Jamahal Hill at a disadvantage throughout the whole fight. It looked like he couldn't put a lot of pressure on his leg, and that kind of prevented him from putting a lot of power in his punches. And he did the best he could, but I can't make an argument that he probably lost all 5 rounds, and it really wasn't close at all. And when you look at Jamahal Hill, I mean, the guy's won 6 of his last 7 fights. He's looked pretty dominant in all of them, and like I said, he gave Alex Pereira a pretty decent fight. I know.
You mean Anthony, I'm sorry to stop you. You mean Rountree and not Hill, right?
Yes, yeah. I know Rountree, has looked great. He's won 6 of his last 7 fights, and his only loss in the last 7 was to Alex, and he looked pretty dominant in all his wins. I know we're gonna have Ankalaev and Alex Pereira rematch sometime later in this year, but I would like to see Rountree fight against a guy like Yuri Prohaska. Both those guys have lost to Alex Pereira, and both those guys are coming off of wins against Jamahal Hill. I know you got Carlos Ulberg in there, so you got to fit him somewhere in there. But I think Rountree has to be fighting either Yuri Prohaska, most likely, or Carlos Ulberg in a future next title bout contender. Because, like I said, Ankalaev and Alex Part 2 has to happen. So we're going to need one more fight to decide who's going to be the next contender. Rountree has to be in there, and I would love to see stylistically Rountree versus Yuri Prohaska, and I think that can decide who can be fighting for the light heavyweight championship belt next after we get the rematch.
I was going to say another option you could do. What about if you did? What if you did Ulberg versus Blachowicz? What do you think? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad. I know. I'm not sure if Ulberg and them. I think may have just fought. And he beat Blachowicz. But yeah, if they want to do the rematch of those guys, that would be a good fight. But yeah, those are the 3 guys right now: Rountree, Yuri Prohaska, and Carlos Ulberg. Again, whoever they want to decide. I know Carlos Ulberg is a guy who's on the rise.
Yeah,
so I would like to see the 2 veterans,
sure did.
Rountree and
He
Yuri
beat Blachowicz by
Prohaska,
decision in March. You're correct. He sure did.
So I think Carlos Ulberg. I think maybe like I said, one of those guys, 2 of those guys are gonna have to fight. I would like to see Rountree and Yuri Prohaska, since they're the 2 older guys, and they fought for the belt before. I would like to see those guys fight. And I think stylistically, that's a great fight for the fans.
For sure. And I think this is a perfect segue to move right along to UFC 317. But before we do that, just wanted to give a quick recap. I finished this card 7-5-1, 7-5. I finally got a main event correct for the first time since UFC Kansas City in April. So I'm very happy about that. We eclipsed the 140 plus win total mark for the year. Hope you do a little bit better on UFC 317 as the promotion shifts back to the United States for at least the first 2 weeks in July. And it'll start again, UFC 317 main event for the UFC vacant lightweight championship. It is for Islam Makhachev's UFC lightweight championship. As soon as the bell rings, the title will be vacant. It is the former UFC featherweight champion in Ilia Topuria taking on the former UFC lightweight champion in Charles Oliveira, who has a chance to become a 2-time champion and is a pretty considerable underdog. I love this fight. I know it's not the fight that everybody wanted to see, but these 2 are highly, highly skilled. Should be an all-action fight. There's no way this fight goes the distance, and I think somebody's getting viciously finished here. And Charles Oliveira has been uber confident for months that he's going to go out and win the UFC lightweight title, but unfortunately, I just don't see it. I think Topuria's star power is too big. Right now, the UFC is still pushing for an event in Spain. I think an impressive win here could make a possible event there maybe next year a reality. And if you look at Topuria's resume, if he can knock off Oliveira, you need to tell me that knocking off Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski in back-to-back fights isn't good. I don't know what is. So to add a potential another former champion to the list would be pretty impressive. And I think the only way Oliveira wins this fight is if he takes Topuria into deep waters, which is something that Topuria really hasn't experienced yet. And I think more than likely he's going to have to be lucky enough to catch him with something. And if he can do that, he has a chance to win. But But if not, but I could see Topuria coasting and maybe getting a third or fourth round TKO. Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah. I think this fight is the submission king versus the TKO king. I mean, no guy gets submissions better than Charles Oliveira. He's the king of that. So I don't think this fight's going to go the distance. It's either going to end with one of these guys getting the finish, which is very, very exciting for us UFC fans. Charles is obviously going to want to get this fight on the ground, like you said, and try to submit Ilia Topuria, or at least have the control time to get a decision win. But Topuria, man, I mean, Topuria is a really complete fighter. I mean, we've seen when he fought guys who were dominantly grapplers, he was able to submit those guys. And then on the feet, I mean, there's not a guy who may have more power than him in these weight classes. We've seen what he did at 155 against Jalil Herbert. Now him back at 155, we know this guy has the KO power to knock out anybody. Charles Oliveira obviously loves to come forward, but he leaves himself, susceptible to getting hits. And that's not what you want to do against Ilia Topuria. So I think Ilia Topuria is going to be good enough on the ground to be able to get this fight on the feet and avoid those submissions. And I think at some point in the second, third round, I'm going to say towards the end of the second, I think he's going to catch Charles Oliveira with one of his great hits, just like he did the Max Holloway and just like he did the Volkanovski. And I think Ilia Topuria is going to be the new lightweight champion. And, man, what a run that would be to knock out Volkanovski, knock out Max Holloway, to knock out Charles Oliveira. I don't think any UFC fighter has a better 3-fight reign than that.
No, it would be surely hard to top. So I like Topuria too, but I like him a little bit more conservatively. I think he wins in the third round. It should be a very, very exciting fight no matter how long it lasts. And I do think, though, that if Oliveira wins, the internet it might legitimately break. So stay tuned. If X goes down Saturday night, there's a good chance. There's a good chance that the main event was a little bit crazy. So I think. I think given how the rest of the year is going, I mean, if Oliveira wins and it's an impressive win, but it's still a great fight, you never know. A rematch could be in the cards for November or December, but I think Topuria winning to potentially run his record to 17-0 doesn't seem too bad either, and I could see that happening as well. But let's move on to the co-main event. This fight's finally happening. It wasn't quite clear what event this would take place on, but now it's finally done. UFC Flyweight Championship. Alexandre Pantoja, who I think is the most underrated champion in the sport, taking on Kai Kara-France, who could add to the legacy of some of these guys from down under who have really done well and join a list of greats. Alexander Volkanovski being one of them to potentially win a belt and bring it to the homeland, if you will. But I just think Pantoja's grappling is effortless. I mean, what he was able to do to Kaya Sakura in his last title defense was unbelievable. And I personally think the only way Kai Kara-France can win this fight is if he knocks Pantoja out, because I think if he goes to the ground, that's where the weakness lies there. And I actually see Pantoja taking care of business across 5 rounds and winning a 49-46 unanimous decision. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right with you, Zan. Again, I'm glad that we get to see a new top contender for Alexandre Pantoja. Him fighting guys like Al Scarra and Steve Verseg. I don't know if those guys necessarily were worthy of a title shot, but since Pantoja has pretty much ran through the Brandon Morenos and the Brandon Royvals of the world, they're just trying to find any new contender they find. So it's nice that we get this new fresh face for Andre Pantoja. I thought Kai Kara-France looked great with his TKO win over Steve Verseg, and I think he should beat Melbazi. I think he got robbed in that split decision. I think Kai Kara-France won that fight, and like you said, he's the better striker. He's got the TKO power, one of the hardest hitting flyweights on the world. So the only way he could win this is he's going to have to catch Pantoja with a shot. But we've seen guys like that try to do that before, and it didn't work out so well. So I think Pantoja, his relentlessness, how good he is as a grappler, and how just determined he is, how he never stops, his cardio is unbelievable. I think he's going to find a way to take Kai Kara-France's back and ultimately win the fight by decision. I also think on the feet, I think Pantoja can land some good shots. We've seen him do that with the Brandon Moreno fight where he was able to land some good shots as well. So I think both guys will land shots. But ultimately, Pantoja is going to get the back of Kai Kara-France, control him for most of the rounds. And I agree. I think he wins this by decision. He continues this title run. And I think at this point, after this win, He'll probably, if he's not already there, got to be undeniably at least the second greatest flyweight in UFC history, behind Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah, I think that that's a solid argument as well. And something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. Could you see a super fight with Merab in the future? Because I could.
Yeah, I definitely could. I mean, when you look at the flyweight division, I mean, after a couple more fights, there's not going to really be anybody there for Pantoja. He's beating everybody, and all the upcoming contenders are usually losing to guys like Brandon Moreno or Brandon Royval before they even get to this fight. Maybe we could see a guy, we got a fight talking about later. Maybe there's a guy, if he could get a win, maybe there could be a new contender for him. But I think in a couple fights, there's going to be no one left for Pantoja. I mean, what a super fight that would be between him and Merab. I mean, pretty much that might be the only guy that can beat Merab, and it might be the only guy that can beat Pantoja. So why not put those two together in a year and see what happens?
Well, let's move right on to that. We have a potential number one contender fight in the next fight we're talking about. Very, very quick turnaround for Joshua Van as he takes on Brandon Royval. And I think I just took the words out of my mouth. I think too quick of a turnaround is the key here. I like Royval by decision. How about you?
Yeah, I love Joshua Van's potential. I think he's got future title contender all over him. But even if you're not even considering a quick turnaround, even if he had 3-4 months in between, I think at 23 years old, I just think him fighting Brandon Royval is just too much too soon. I wish he could
On
fight
too big of a card too, man.
fights. I think at 23 years old, I would love to see him maybe fight one more time this year and maybe 1 or 2 times next year and revisit this in a year. As great as he is, I mean, Royval is just at a different level. I mean, we've seen Royval take out contenders like Satua Tyrell once before. I do think that this will be a brawl. Both guys will land big shots. But I think Royval is going to win this by decision. We've seen guys like Charles Johnson catch Joshua Van, and I think Royval will be able to do the same. But I will say, man, if at 23 years old, if Joshua Van goes out there, shocks the world, and beats Brandon Royval, I think that's a no-brainer on who's going to be the next guy fighting for the UFC flyweight belt. It would be Joshua Van.
Well, let's move on to the next one now. Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. A lot of people counting out Moicano, especially considering his last fight was against Islam Makhachev, and he was extremely hard on himself after that fight, saying that he never get an opportunity to fight for the lightweight title again. Well, in order to get back into that discussion, he's going to have to beat somebody like Dariush. He does, because I actually think he has a chance to do so, and I actually like the upset here in Moicano. I think he's another signature performance in Las Vegas. He seems to fight usually pretty well in Las Vegas, and I think a ton of people are counting him out. Do you give him a chance?
Yeah, Zay, I guess this is going to be the point of the show where we finally disagree. I'm going to go with Beneil Dariush, but this is really, a coin flip of a pick. This is definitely a fight that could go either way. Two solid grapplers. I'm going to go with Beneil Dariush. I think he's just a little bit better. I think that there's level to this, and I just think that he's a step above Moicano. I think Moicano can beat any of these guys who are in the top 15, but I think once we start getting into the top 10 guys, I think that's where he's going to struggle. And I mean, we've seen Beneil Dariush in fights against guys who are the cream of the crop. He's fought guys like Arman Sarukian. He's fought guys like Charles Oliveira, and yeah, he's lost. But he's been in these wars with these tremendous fighters, and he's got some solid wins, like a win against Matias Gamrot. So I just think Dariush is just a step above Moicano. So I think Dariush is going to get the win by decision, but I would not be shocked if this fight went one way or another.
For sure. And then the main card opener, which was elevated as of recently, we got Payton Talbott taking on Felipe Lima. This is a fight that I'm the least excited about. I'm going to go conservative and say Talbott wins by whatever he wants, but I'm going to go even more conservative and say Talbot by decision. This is a good learning experience for Lima, but I think a little bit too much too soon. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like this is a terrible matchmaking for Payton Talbot. I mean, for a guy who's coming off, I think it was his first loss, to now put him in there with another upcoming hungry contender who's on a 14-fight win streak, I just think that's bad matchmaking. And ultimately, I think Talbot's going to lose again and have back-to-back losses. I think Lima, who's been unbelievable, undefeated in the UFC, he's been on a tremendous win streak. And now that he's going to be moving to bantamweight at 135, I think he might even be even better. I think he's going to take the back of Payton Talbot, and I think he's going to out-grapple him. And I'm going to pick Felipe Lima to not only get the win, I think he's going to get the win by submission. And ultimately, I think it's going to completely kill Payton Talbott's confidence now having back-to-back losses.
Very, very, very interesting. So we disagree there, and as we move closer and closer to the end of the show, we have a few noteworthy prelims. Which ones are you keeping your and this weekend is ones that are can't miss in the earlier portion of the card?
I'm definitely looking forward to the featured prelim. Jack Hermanson and Gregory Rodriguez. Both guys aren't currently ranked, but they pretty much are ranked fighters according to me. I mean, Jack Hermanson looked really good, was able to stop the height train of Joe Pfeiffer, and Gregory Rodriguez was just recently in a Fight Night main event against Jared Cannonier. I mean, RoboCop can knock down anybody, and I know Jack Hermanson, with his cardio and his grappling ability, could out-grapple anybody. So I think stylistically, that's a really interesting matchup to watch. I think Jack Hermanson will be able to win because of that grappling ability. But, man, if Gregory Rodriguez can catch him, he could be looking at another ranked fight again and maybe another main event fight night. So I'm definitely looking forward to that fight as well. What are some prelims that you're looking forward to, Zan?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to the whole preliminary card. I'm just excited to see what Terrence McKinney does against Borishev. Of just considering that Borishev, you never know what fight you're going to get from him. He's a pretty interesting striker, but when he goes to the ground, he struggles. And McKinney has knockout power, so that's the one. It's the one that I'm excited about. And if I were to even put a best bet on this weekend, that would be one that I think could potentially hit the over 2.5 rounds mark, and I could see that being a very entertaining fight. But that's the fight I'm keyed in on, very similar to how you're keyed on the Jack Hermanson fight. So we'll see how these fights go, and I think that these prelims have a chance to be really good. So, and the night before in Chicago, we have the final PFL semifinals. Like, we have some pretty interesting fights on that. I will be in attendance. But before we do that, let's recap what took place at PFL World Tournament in number 6 as we get closer and closer to the end of the semifinals. Here we had the main event of the evening. Gotsi Rabatinov making very, very quick work of Kevin Lee. There was no surprises for me in that one. I figured that Gotsi would be able to beat Kevin Lee in the way that he did, and unfortunately, I think Kevin Lee needs to think about retirement because that's the worst I've ever seen him in quite a bit. What did you think? What did you think of the main event in this past week? And just really quickly, what were some of the other noteworthy fights that caught your attention as the main card, as it had to do with the tournament format?
Yeah, I like what you said. I think Godziv really impressed me with the KO over Kevin Lee. I mean, the guy's on a 12-fight win streak. He's going to be fighting in the finals again. Ultimately, I think he'll probably end up winning the tournament again. And I mean, I think he at this point has established himself as probably one of the best fighters in the PFL and one of the best fighters who's not currently in the UFC. I'm definitely intrigued to watch what his future career holds. But I think this is a guy that's going to continue on his reign, and I hope that someday we can see what he could do in the UFC.
And then just moving over to the Chicago portion, it's the final semifinals portion before we get to the August finals, which should be very, very interesting. We have a card this Friday from the Wintrust Arena. You could argue almost every single fight from top to bottom is a great fight, but I wanted to key in on the final 4 fights of the evening. Starting at the main event here, we got Fabian Edwards, 14-14, and Josh Silveira. Both have identical records. Both have already had some pretty good wins in the tournament thus far. What do you think of the main event overall, and could you see a finish out of this one, or do we think that the judges are going to be needed here? What do you think?
Yeah, I like this card a lot. There's a lot of stars on here. Fabian Edwards is fighting on this card. Phil Davis, Sergio Pettis, and Rafian Stotz. I think that's going to be the fight I'm most intrigued on. Both those guys, I think, are tremendous fighters. And I mean, outside the Johnny Evelyn fight, Fabian Edwards has fared pretty well against most other fighters. So I think he'll be able to get the win in this one. Phil Davis going up against a rising contender and Sullivan Coley. I think that's a tremendous fight. I think Davis finds a way to pull out with that one. And then I think the next fight, Sergio Pettis and Rafian Stotz, I think that's going to be the fight tonight. It's going to be really close. I'm going to side with Stotz in that one by decision. But, man, I think that fight's going to give us some fireworks.
Yeah, I'm going to actually have to disagree with you here. I like Sergio Pettis in that one, given that he's getting close to his hometown. And I just feel like an active Sergio Pettis is a dangerous one. And he feels like his Bellator reign was a little bit it cut short, but I can see that one going either way too. But I think the fight that people are sleeping on here is Dalton Roster versus Aaron Jeffrey is going to be a fun. And when I think that fight, there's no way that fight goes the distance. I think whoever wins the when it's going to be by an ST finish, and I think it's going to end up being one of the viral highlights of the year outside of the UFC. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I think honestly, I think this may be the best PFL tournament card we've had, and it's going to set up, I think, for a tremendous final for later in the year. And I know we didn't get to speak about it much, but I know for the rest of the UFC Baku card, Sadikov fight with Mata, that was a tremendous fight, maybe fight of the year. He really impressed me. Faziev getting back in the win streak after a couple years, that really impressed me as well. And then Curtis Blades, I know it wasn't exciting, but him getting the win over a potential up and rising in Kunev, I think that was a fight that could have went 50-50, and it was nice to see Blades get back in the win column as well.
Yeah, I thought overall the card was decent. Despite the lack of finish, despite there only being 2 finishes on the card, I thought the card was decent as well. But I think UFC 317 this upcoming Saturday will give us a lot more action. So before we get out of here, and this was very fun and a fun first show back. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to add, or do you want to tell the people kind of what the future of our schedule is going to look like, given that we're kind of back in the groove of everything now?
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know that MMA Outsiders is back, better than ever. We're going to be bringing you, shows as the season goes on, depending on, how the UFC schedule and other schedules work. So it won't be every week or every other 2 weeks. It's just going to be dependent on how the season goes. I know there's no UFC card next week, so we won't be, unfortunately, on the air next week. But the week after, we'll be on to preview UFC Fight Night and obviously give our reactions to what's going to be a tremendous card on UFC 317. It's going to be tremendous weekend for fight fans. International Fight Week is always a stacked card from top to bottom, and you're going to really want to keep your eyes on every single one of those fights. And not only do we have that, we have a tremendous fight card for the PFL that Zan has the privilege of attending. So I know it's going to be a great weekend this weekend for you, Zan, too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's my first PFL event in a little over a year, and out of the 3 PFL events I will now be attending, I think this is without question the best one of the 3, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it delivers. And as you just alluded to a minute ago, I think regardless of how the fights play out, I think it's going to set up to be a great final in August. And as much as people like to criticize the PFL, I think that they're starting to listen to the fans a little bit more. I think that the matchmaking and tournament seating is a little bit better, and I'm one of the few people that's going to say, hey, that I think if this card delivers, I think it's only a good sign of things to come. And I think that now more and more people are going to be able to watch the PFL events on the brand, I guess the brand newly launched, if you will, PFL app. I think a lot of things are on the up and up for them. And again, I think if the Chicago card goes well, I think this could be a springboard to some big things in the future. They've got that huge Africa card in the middle of July. They're doing some stuff in Brussels. They're going to be launching PFL Pacific here soon. So I think a lot of things are starting to go on the horizon, and I think the fans are starting to get what they praised, if you will, or get what they've been requesting for a while. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited though, for sure. So that's going to do it for another edition of the MMA Outsiders. Thanks again for tuning in. For Zan, I'm Anthony. We will see you guys in a couple of weeks. And until then, have a great rest of your week. Have a good one, everyone.
We'll catch you.